So, good evening. We'll go ahead and get started. As a reminder, this is also being videotaped. We know for a lot of our community members, they weren't able to attend, so they'll be able to watch this later on. So, good evening. I am Pat Watson, Superintendent of Bloomfield Hills Schools, and welcome to our community conversation about student mental health and school safety. So, as a note again, the community conversation is being recorded. We'll be taking notes and also receiving questions. If there are any questions that cannot be answered this evening, we will follow up and share them on our website moving forward. And so I want to introduce those members that are going to be our panel of presenters that are also employed by Bloomfield Hills Schools. The first is Pat Sidge. He's a retired police sergeant with an extensive law enforcement background and also spent time over a decade as a school liaison officer. He works in collaboration with district and school administration to review and establish appropriate guidelines, procedures, and plans to ensure safe and secure schools. We have Margaret Schultz, who is our Director of Instructional Equity in Title IX. She has a bachelor's and master's degree from Wayne State University in mathematics education and a master's degree from Purdue University Calumet in educational administration. Margaret is an expert in the use of restorative practices in schools. She has undergone significant training in the areas of social emotional learning, equity, and inclusion, specifically on systems of support for marginalized students. And Margaret has been with Bloomfield Hills Schools for over 20 years, serving as a teacher, a building administrator, and now in her current role as the Director of Instructional Equity in Title IX. David Shulkin, who is our Director of Learning Technology. David holds numerous certifications and holds a bachelor and master's degree in the field of technology. He has 30 plus working years in the industry, with 20 of those years in educational tech. Deb Glazer, who is our district nurse. She has a BA in kinesiology and BS in nursing from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. She serves as an adjunct faculty member for Oakland Community College. She has served in that position for over 10 years, teaching clinical nursing. She has additional leadership and work experience in the nonprofit sector with a focus on community health and wellness, and she serves, again, as our district nurse and health specialist. Jake McDermott, who's our Director of Physical Plant Services. Jake is a graduate from Western Michigan University with a bachelor's degree in business administration. He's also a licensed master plumber, and Jacob has worked in education for 12 years. Julianne Umbarger, she is one of our social workers for Bloomfield Hills. She holds a degree in honors psychology from Wayne State University and a master's degree in social work from the University of Michigan. Julianne, this is her 6th year as a social worker and second in Bloomfield Hills Schools. She also owns her own private clinical therapy practice, working with individuals, couples, and families with ages ranging from 7 to 52. And Lisa Fish, who's also one of the BHS school social workers. She holds a bachelor's degree from Michigan State University and a master's degree in social work from Wayne State University. She has been in the mental health field for close to 30 years, including psychiatric and medical facilities, and over 20 years working with us as a school social worker. She has certification as a trauma practitioner from the National Institute for Trauma and Loss in Children. She has served on the board of the Michigan Association of School Social Workers, as well as the district social emotional learning team and special education design team. Also, some of our police partners that are here from Bloomfield Hills, we have Captain Gormley. From Bloomfield Township, we have Chief Gallagher, Fire Chief Leroy, Officer Marissa Miller, Officer Kelly McGraw, and Communications Supervisor Mick Faust. And from West Bloomfield Township, we have Chief Padden, Deputy Chief Lawson, and Fire Chief Lynn. We also have some other police and fire department partners that are here as well. So kind of the building blocks and what we're looking at from a school perspective. So we're looking at these 6 different things as we talk about safety, we talk about mental health within our school system. We're looking at ongoing training, how we prepare and what our preparation is going to be, what our response is going to be. We look at culture and climate, We look at technology. We can't underestimate the role technology plays in our current environment when it comes to safety, when it comes to mental health. These are all things that are evolving and playing out. We look at our physical spaces. We also look at mental and behavioral health within our students in our buildings. This week, Bloomfield Hills Schools, for the second year in a row, we're participating in National Safety Week, so you'll see something pretty much every day about that, with a focus on social emotional learning, reviewing all the drills that take place. A lot of times I receive questions about the drills. There are a number of drills that are required by the state of Michigan. So often parents wonder, is it an opportunity maybe to have more drills or less drills? But we are definitely in compliance with what is required from the state of Michigan. Reporting tools, how do you let people know what's going on? Testing our communication system, and then crisis support when needed. So questions, you can use the QR code on the agenda that you picked up at the beginning to let us know what questions you have about safety and security of student and mental health. Any questions we can't get to or need time to research will be responded to via email. And oftentimes, the question may not come to you during the presentation. It might be an hour, 2 hours, 2 days, a week, a month down the road. Feel free to reach out to me directly with any questions you have about this or anything else. So kind of looking at the current national environment, there's pretty much something regarding school safety or school mental health every single day in the news. We know that schools and universities nationwide are trying to solve the same topic. My youngest is in college, and she's receiving information all the time about being safe, about mental health. So we know this is something on a national scale. We know that this past couple years, 21-22, had the most school shootings in the history of the United States. In contrast, we've seen a reduction nationally in bullying and harassment. We know that safety tools, equipment, and prevention tactics are all things schools are expected to teach and cover now. It is part of what we do on an ongoing yearly, monthly, daily basis. It's always changing as far as what the expectations are, what's going on, what we need to prepare for, what we need to be aware of, what information we need to share with the community, with students, with staff. That is always changing. Every time you think you've heard it all, you've seen it all, there's another story that comes out of something you didn't think of, something that was never done before, something that wasn't on the radar that you have to prepare for. Hundreds, if not thousands, of tools available. There's so many different things. I probably get 30 to 35 emails per day about, have you tried this for mental health? Have you tried this for safety? And you reach out. Well, no, it's not in any schools yet, but would you like to have it? So there's a lot of different things as far as tools that are out there, and that's only increasing. And resources are increasing, but they're finite. We know in the recent state budget, there were some allocations that are out there for different things when it comes to mental health, when it comes to school safety that are available to public schools in the state of Michigan. So we've been going through the process of reviewing those and applying for those funds as well. All right, so at this time, we're going to move on, talk a little bit about culture and climate, and I will turn it over to Ms. Schultz.
Hi, thank you. Well, I'm going to try to put this in. As Mr. Watson said, I'm Margaret Schultz. I'm the Director of Instructional Equity, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about culture and climate. So first of all, relationships matter. Strong relationships provide a foundation for student engagement, belonging, and ultimately learning. When students have positive interactions with teachers, they have fewer behavioral problems. So we know that when we talk about safety, relationships are key. These are also just some proactive measures that we have been using throughout our schools for several years. This year, we have put in No Place for Hate across all of our buildings. All of our schools are working closely with the Anti-Defamation League to become No Place for Hate schools. We know that environments that are free from harassment and bullying allow more students to feel that they belong. Belonging is what helps students feel connected to place, and kids are less likely to have behaviors to harm the place that they feel connected to. We know that social emotional learning mitigates violence, student self-regulation, social regulation and problem solving, all our SEL skills. They are key to preventing school violence. We have a pretty robust social emotional learning program in place. And while social emotional learning has been critical across the district for the 20 years that I've been here, over the last few, we've really been intentional about different pieces, including a curriculum, which our social workers will talk about a little bit as well. Restorative practices promote health and well-being, and lower discipline rates. They build community and belonging. So these are all things that we're constantly working on, but are preventative measures that we are very proud of, the work that we're doing in these areas. So we're gonna jump to mental and behavioral health, and I wanna bring up two of our amazing school social workers, Lisa Fish and Julianne Umbarger.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lisa Fish, one of the school social workers. I'm happy to be here to share some of the additions that we've had in our district to strengthen our mental health and wellness for both students and staff. So first and foremost, we now have full-time social workers in all the buildings. We have therapy dogs, which have already made such a huge impact on our students, and I'm proud to say that I get to see that firsthand. As far as SEL, hopefully most of you are pretty familiar. There's been obviously a really big push for social emotional learning. And historically, social workers embed social emotional learning in their everyday practice with students and staff as well. But obviously, post-COVID, we felt it was necessary, and we created a multidisciplinary team to create and develop, like Margaret mentioned, a really robust curriculum that addresses specific skill sets that children need for later life skills.
Good evening, everyone. So our district offers mental health support before, during, and after an emotional or behavioral challenge. And what I mean by one of those challenges is any internal or external challenge that is negatively impacting a student's ability to learn. So before, that's really the preventative piece, which are those school-wide initiatives. During a challenge would be the intervention piece, which is often a team approach, teachers, counselors, social workers, administrators, if applicable. And then after is that follow-up piece, check-ins with students, restorative practices, if those are indicated, collaboration with teachers, and connecting with outside supports, if those are applicable as well.
So this slide represents our state and our district guidelines that really addresses the whole child. It's a multi-tiered system support. And really what this does is helps our educators provide our students with appropriate academic and behavioral strategies. So as you can see, there's 3 tiers, 3 lines of support, and as the numbers grow, the supports intensify. So tier 1 represents pretty much what teachers do every single day. It could be morning meetings, it could be positive behavior supports that they institute every day. When students are struggling in any capacity, academic or behavior, we look at response to intervention. So if we see that a student is struggling and not responsive to those tier 1 interventions or supports, then we look at tier 2. And an example of tier 2, which is more targeted, would be like removing students for small instruction from one of our interventionists. It could be a small group for social skills. So those are just a couple examples of tier 2. And then again, if we don't see response, if a student is still struggling, then we look at the tier 3 supports, which is the most intensive line of supports. And this would involve staff from different disciplines. And this really is where we provide more formalized assessment and evaluations.
And next up is Dave.
Good evening, excuse me. Good evening, David Shulkin with Technology. And if you don't know, it's National Cyber Awareness Month, so please make sure you have good passwords out there. If you recall, a few years ago, we passed a $200 million bond for the district, and part of that, a large part of that is around safety and security. And of course, technology plays a big role in that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity for the moment, but also a little bit of those other things that are going to come along in the bond. So cybersecurity, we have the normal things that we do. We've hardened our networks. We do those pieces that are required for our insurance, et cetera. Things like multi-factor authentication, password protection, password managers, those typical types of things. For our students, we do content filtering. And so all the devices that we provide them from the district, wherever they go in the world, it comes back to a content filter that helps alleviate or reduce inappropriate content to them. In addition, when we talk about things like cyber security, let's say ransomware, we have disaster recovery and those typical things that you would do. So if we did have an attack, we could recover services very quickly. As we do our tabletop exercises and kind of test through our scenarios, we typically think we can get at least most of the systems back up in a day or two, and maybe worse, a week. And so we're really proud of that kind of work. But it's very difficult, and as you know, we have school districts all over the nation that this happens to them every single day. And hackers only have to do it once. We have to be perfect every single time. One of the other advantages for us is that we have an in-house IT department. We haven't outsourced that. And what does that mean to us in terms of safety and security? Well, as we get a report, an incident or challenge that might happen in the classroom to a student or a staff member, or if it's a cybersecurity issue or other, we're able to forensically engage that very quickly. So we can mitigate the problem, we can isolate what we might need to do, and then we can forensically investigate and support both our teachers and the families and our students through those processes. And so that's a big advantage. In some of our other districts, they may be outsourced and they don't have those tools available, or the timing is not as efficient or effective as we'd like to be, or they might like to be. As part of the bond, we also did access control. This is typical, you know how you have your little fob or your ID badge. So through the bond, we've been able to update all of our access control across the district, with some exceptions, as construction is still being phased and some that'll come out and new will come in. And there's also, of course, supply chain issues as we put in new types of equipment. But that's a big piece, because now we can see far better into our systems, and we can manage the access into our building and outside as well. Within the bond, one of the other big pieces, when we think about our ALICE training that we've been talking about this week at Safety Week, is notification. And so part of the bond is we are developing a far larger systemic notification system. What does this mean to you? So as a staff member or a student, or maybe even the community, depending on the situation, notifications can go out from a variety of things. They can be triggered by maybe, like we pull a fire alarm, or it could be triggered by a panic button, or triggered by me calling 911 for a reason, for an emergency. That then can communicate to our desktops, our laptops, our digital signages, our cell phones, our PA systems. Those are important because, as you know, technology can fail. And so as we've gone through this bond, we've thought about how do we build in redundancy. So let's say our PA system fails, we've built in other redundancies to get that notification to you, so you can make an informed decision about your safety or your student's safety. In addition, we are a center program for the county for deaf and hard of hearing, and that's incredibly important. I have deaf and hard of hearing in my family, so when we think about these issues, for many of us who can hear, for me, I can hear, and so when I see and hear something, an emergency, I get all of that information. Well, in the bond program, we've now, part of that notification, we're now providing 3 different pieces. We're providing audio, text, and flashers. And so we'll have, as we kind of go through this process, we'll have maybe different colors depending on the situation. So if you have a tornado, that might be a different color, and then you know what to do. And so my point of all that is that we're thinking about all these notification systems very systemically, and making sure that all of our students and our staff and any community members who might be in will get that notification, be able to make an informed decision. And lastly, as part of the bond program, and this has been going on as we've been doing construction and phasing in, we've been putting in new camera systems. This has been a nice upgrade because it provides us some analytics and some notifications around if we have people coming through, we can follow them, track them. So for example, if I had a backpack that was suspicious to me, that might be left in the media center, I could actually track that very easily about what happened, who put that there, and then what happened to it later on in the day. And so those are just some of those little details that we're doing in the bond. And as we go through this bond over the next couple of years and we finally put these in, we'll keep evolving and tweaking and making this better. That's what I have for technology, and I'd like to bring up Jacob McDermott, who's my wonderful colleague.
As Dave mentioned, my name is Jake McDermott, and I'm Physical Plant Services Director. So as we move on to the physical spaces for our district, one thing that we go to is our Bluepoint system that is installed in all of our schools. Bluepoint is a user-friendly, rapid response notification system for law enforcement. You'll see the blue lights, you'll see the poll stations. Anytime that is pulled, you will see many local law enforcement and not so local law enforcement come running to the need of the buildings. We're very lucky to partner with our local police, and they actually even have keys to our Knox boxes, and they have fobs to our buildings, so anytime they need to gain access into our buildings, we encourage that. It's not just the fire department that does that. Anytime we can get them in our buildings, it's better for them and it's better for us. One thing you'll notice with all of our buildings are numbered. We number all the doors, and this is a requirement through the fire department, but it helps us in daily tasks. We can always, we know what doors are being used a lot. We know where we can send people through certain doors. We kind of know what doors need to be secured more often because it's a highly used door. So, it's just another layer of security that we use around the district. We've done a really good job welcoming law enforcement into our buildings. Anytime they can do a training, we encourage to use our buildings. We want them to come in. We want them to say hi to the kids. They're just a great resource to have, and they're in our backyards. It's a good partnership. So anything we can do to have this interaction, we encourage. Dave mentioned a lot with the bond. And one thing for us, bond is playing a big part in secure vestibules. And secure vestibules will be anyone who wants to visit our building will have to come into a secure vestibule, be funneled through to talk to a secretary to make sure that they're in the right spot and they're being checked as a visitor and they can funnel into the school, and we know that we're letting someone into the building through a nice, safe funnel way. We're coming into the crazy time, right? We got snow coming, hard to think, but it's here. And one thing that we do for physical plant services, we do everything in-house when it comes to maintaining grounds, plowing the streets, taking care of our grounds, taking care of our playgrounds. And this is, inclement weather is a big thing for us right now. And so right now I'm gonna hand it over to Pat Sidge.
Thanks, Jake. As Jake mentioned, my name is Pat Sidge. I'm the Administrator of Public Safety for the district. And today I'm going to discuss a little bit about our preparation and responses to our overall safety and security programs in the district. And as you take a look at this slide here, we talk about emergency preparedness and what does it really mean and what does it really entail. Well, there's 3 circles here. It doesn't really give the true picture of what a comprehensive security program is like. It's very complex and detailed. And when we talk about that, we want to make sure that we're making a plan. We have a plan for our district's security and safety measures. And as you have listened to the previous presenters here, I hope that you're gaining from that a comprehensive school safety program is not just one person. It's not just me. It's not just me working and keeping the facility safe or the students safe. It's a multi-tiered approach that has a lot of disciplines involved in it. And then we're taking that and making sure that we're prepared with that plan. So we have a plan and we train to the plan. And we communicate our plans through various means so that our district administrators are familiar with our processes and procedures. That then entails our staff members and teachers to be familiar with it, and then that trickles down to our students. So in March of 2022, I came on board here as the Administrator of Public Safety, and some of the things that I looked at to bring to the district and work on quickly was one of the things I did right away was to meet with all of our law enforcement agencies and partners that serve the Bloomfield Hills Schools community. And that is a very important piece, because without them and their partnerships, we really couldn't do an effective job. As a retired law enforcement officer, I can tell you that these partnerships are priceless, and we're very fortunate to have a very strong, good working relationship with those agencies. As Jake mentioned, we have an open door policy in our facilities, and we invite those agencies to come in at any time that they would like. It's a non-restrictive because it benefits us as well as those agency responders. District-wide radio network. One of the things that we are working on currently and have in place was the ability to communicate in our buildings on a day-to-day basis, which we have, but the one thing that we really didn't have was the ability to do that district-wide. And by that I mean effectively communicate from one of our buildings to the furthest building outside of the district. We didn't have that ability, and our board was very fortunate I was very fortunate to have the board approve the funding for that, so we are now in the process of working with a vendor to bring that to fruition. So we're looking for that probably in the spring of the year, that all of our buildings will be tied together with a district-wide radio network. And in addition to that, we will be sharing those radios with our law enforcement and first responder agencies. We also updated our emergency operating plan as required by law. Every school district has to biannually upgrade those plans, and we did that through the district's administrators and our cabinet team, along with partnerships with our law enforcement. We worked together to upgrade those plans, and that was completed. Final edition was done in June of 2022. The bond work and secure vestibules, as Jake mentioned, I'm very excited to bring that to us, and I think that will greatly enhance the overall security of our buildings. So this week you may have seen or may have heard through some of our communications that we are adopting ALICE throughout the district, and I'm very proud of that. And we're kind of just getting underfoot this week here on introducing ALICE to our students. And as you see here on the slide, ALICE is A for alert, L is for the lockdown, I is inform, C is for counter, and E is for evacuate. Well, the nice thing about ALICE is it's a little bit more broadened than the traditional lockdown, which traditionally when you have a lockdown, that's a one-dimensional type of response, and ALICE allows us to be multidimensional. We can take a situation as it occurs in front of us, and we use all of our senses to figure out what we think is the best response and approach. So while some of our staff may decide that locking down is the appropriate action, some may think that evacuate is the appropriate action, and based upon what they're seeing in real time, those are both correct responses. And as we work to transition towards ALICE, those instructions are now being passed on to our students as well. The response model. So you may have heard recently a lot about behavioral threat analysis. It's kind of a key word throughout school districts, and how do you respond to threatening behavior, and what's your district doing about it? I'm often asked that, what do you put into place? In responding to safety and response plans, while the obvious thing would be, what are you doing for an armed intruder? Well, a good comprehensive safety and security program is much more involved and complex than just what are you doing for an armed intruder. While that's very important, and ALICE works to address that, there's much more that goes on behind the scenes about how we're handling situations and threatening behaviors. So when we do identify a student that may be presenting behaviors to us that warrants further investigation, as you can see here, we do have a complex program and plan in place. The important thing to take note on this is that it's multi-tiered, multidisciplined, And what I mean by that is it's not just one person taking a look at these behaviors. It's social workers, it's principals, it's teachers, it's parapros, it's law enforcement. It's a collaborative effort from input from all of those people to make a valid conclusion as to what our next responses will be for behaviors that are concerning, and what are the next best steps, and then what is actually best for the student involved. If there's an incident that happens in the district, we want to remind you that communicate via Remind is the communication method for which you will receive the notifications and communications coming from our district. Michigan Student Safety Program, okay to say, you may have heard about that. That's a very big, very familiar program. It's monitored by the Michigan State Police. And anytime they receive a tip or threatening information that comes to them, that is then shared immediately with our law enforcement partners to thoroughly investigate, and they share that information with us as district administrators as well. So then again, we can look to see what the nature of the threat is and what the appropriate actions are for response for that. You see here too, there are various means to do that. There's a phone number, you can text it, you can email it. And there are very effective ways to do that. And we encourage our students to report any behavior that they think is suspicious or concerning to them through that OK to Say program. We also have the Bloomfield Hills reporting tool where we're asking students to take a stand and report incidents of bias and hate. We know that in order to effectively respond to some of those kinds of situations or incidents, we need to know about them. And so through that, we're encouraging our students to develop partnerships with our adults in the building, and that they can take a stand and do the right thing when they're seeing situations like this or incidents like that, that they are taking the appropriate measures and that they are reporting them. And next up, I'd like to introduce Debbie Glazer, who's our district nurse.
All right, good evening, everybody. Managing student, it's really loud, sorry, okay. Managing student health conditions while at school is an important component of school safety. We've standardized our disease management training, which allows all of our staff across the district to be able to safely care for all of our students, and this includes those at our Bloomfield preschools. With a focus on preparedness, designated building staff across the district have undergone CPR and AED training with first aid instruction. I want to point out that all of our bus drivers and all of our preschool staff have undergone CPR, AED, and first aid training and certification. The goal is to be able to safely manage an emergency while in and out of the classroom, as well as on the bus. Additionally, you can see up on the slide that we've made Narcan available in our 3 middle schools here in Bloomfield Hills High School, as well as at Bowers Academy. Those buildings, administrators, as well as additional designated staff have received training and are prepared to respond to an opiate overdose. So in addition to purchasing new wheelchairs for all of our buildings, we have begun upgrading signage around the buildings for visual safety. And last, I just wanted to point out that you'll see that we've got trauma bags placed in every building that include our Stop the Bleed tourniquets, as well as chest seals. All of our buildings do have the basic supplies that they need to manage, day-to-day injuries. But we did want to put in these specific trauma bags that we can use in the event of an emergency. Building administrators across the district, as well as identified members of our incident response teams, are familiar with the contents of the bags, and they've also undergone training on how to use the items that it contains. And I'll turn it over back to Pat.
So that brings us to circling back to the ongoing training. And any good safety and security program and procedures involve ongoing training. As I mentioned earlier when I started this presentation, I mentioned that we have a plan and we have to prepare for the plan. And how do we prepare for the plan? we train to that plan. And that's a good reason why we enhance our drills and we do those safety drills, because it's during those times that sometimes we often identify areas, maybe we had a pull station that didn't function correctly, and we identify it through that. There's also a means of totally evaluating the programs and figuring out what our best practices are across the state and implementing those, and we train to those plans as well. As you can see here in this slide, our safety plan is ongoing, but it doesn't really have a beginning and an end. It really kind of just molds and blends together. It flows together, and that's really what a good safety program is all about. It entails all of the listings that you have here: our administrators, our families, teachers, the Board of Education, our students, law enforcement, our social services, and our mental health providers. All of those play a very integral role in having a complex, comprehensive school safety program. And school safety, as you can see in here, it moves. It's a very fluid concept. It's not meant to be static, it's dynamic, it's ever-changing. And and we do that by continually monitoring our buildings. We go into those buildings while they're doing their drills, we're evaluating them. Our SROs are in the buildings constantly, and they're looking and developing relationships with our students. They're developing relationships with our administrators. And while they're there doing that, they're taking a look at the facilities and the structures, and do they provide adequate ingress and egress, and all those things that go behind the scenes that you might not necessarily think about in a safety and security program. Those are the things that we're doing on a daily basis. Our next steps. So we, again, as Dave mentioned, we're considering what's the latest technology. Technology is ever increasing, ever enhancing, and it plays a very important role in school safety. What's the latest that's out there? What's being considered? What should we look at? And what can help facilitate a better overall program? Additional security funding. We're always looking at grants. We're always looking at additional ways to fund the security measures. As Superintendent Watson mentioned earlier, we do get numerous emails. I get probably a dozen or so a day on, hey, this is the new latest and greatest technologies and things that you should have and things that you consider putting into your facilities. And while that's all great and good, we have to take a look at those, but again, we do look at our resources to sustain those. Continuation of our safety team. We have a safety team put together here in the district, and we continue to discuss ways in which that we can improve our safety programs. Discussion with student organizations. As you've heard earlier, relationships with our students and our kids are crucial, and they play a very integral role in an overall safety program within the district. The kids know what's going on in the buildings right away, oftentimes before the adults do. And it's developing these strong relationships with these students that will help us identify areas of concern probably and hopefully beforehand. Continuation of the safety conversation with the community. And again, it's through platforms like this where we're having these open discussions with our community partners on what we're doing as a district to improve our security measures. And I think with that, we come back to Superintendent Watson.
All right, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Have a great night. And if we could have our law and fire department partners come on stage for a minute, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.